Good morning, everyone. As John mentioned, my name is Tosh Gierek, and I do work for the Ministry of Natural Resources. And until recently, I was the manager of the Business Partnerships and Outreach section. Primarily, we have responsibility for the Species at Risk Stewardship Fund, but I'm also very glad to say that we also have the opportunity to be involved in incentive programs. And it's being involved in those incentive programs within our section that gave us the opportunity to be part of the Bobolink Roundtable. And I must say that up until recently, with my colleagues from OMAFRA, I was part of the Bobolink Roundtable to provide co-secretariat support. And I can't tell you honestly how easy of a gig that really has been and how much of a joy it has been being part of that group. I did want to touch a little bit on some of the pieces that Ron spoke about. I think that what Ron had laid out was a real good examination of a species being listed, the challenges and issues that poses, and some of the response and the follow-up. And I think that the first two parts of Ron's presentation are not unique. I would not suggest in any way that they're unique. A listing of a species, is that unique? Probably not. I don't think so. The challenges that go along with the listing of a species, is that unique? Probably not. I think we've heard earlier today and probably heard yesterday about some of the challenges from other species being listed. What I would assert, though, what is quite unique and gets to this theme of collaboration and finding innovative solutions is the response to that listing and the response to the challenges and the issues that listing posed. And not just the response of government. I think Ron talked about the government's implementation of a temporary 3-year exemption period for agricultural activities. I don't really think that's the unique part. I think the unique part was the willingness and the understanding, the willingness, first of all, of the parties and the sectors that are involved, so the agricultural sector, the development sector, including renewable energy, aggregates, and the home builders sector, as well as the conservation-minded folks, recognizing the issues, recognizing the challenges, and understanding the need to come together to find workable solutions. So I think that's really the unique part of the Bobolink Roundtable. And what I'm going to spend the next few minutes here is just talking about, I get the great job of being fortunate enough to talk about the great work they have done. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about some of the outcomes from that collaboration and what I'd like to classify as really innovative solutions. And kind of keeping in the theme with, I should have been on this slide all along, my apologies, folks. So really in keeping with that theme of collaboration and innovative solutions, we'll go to the next slide here. So let's characterize what the issue is. I think, again, as I said earlier, Ron really characterized it well. But I think when you drill down or you get up to another level, you kind of take a look at, well, what are the real issues? I think the first is to try to preserve the habitat for a species at risk. And this is maybe a little bit unique for the bobolink, is that it does rely on managed landscapes. So that's a nuance that I don't think we necessarily see in a lot of other species at risk. So that's a bit of a challenge. I think the other challenge is to allow opportunities for development to occur. And when I say development, I also mean agricultural activities. It's not just specific to one sector, but it's allowing those opportunities for it to continue while at the same time preserving habitat. It almost seems like a conundrum. I mean, really, how do you achieve that? But I think that we do have, the example that I'm going to give is an example of where that creativity can come and some of those collaborative solutions can come from. And I think that when we take a look at those first two challenges and understanding the habitat needs of bobolink, they do rely on managed landscapes. They are found primarily in southern Ontario. Being I wouldn't say an abundant species, but a species where we typically know where they exist. Ron talked about the cow-calf belt. We know where they are. And this is in southern Ontario, where I think the vast majority of it, if not all of it, is privately held land. And if Betty Jean spoke earlier, she talked about 85% of the private land in southern Ontario is owned by farmers. So really, what's the solution here? I think what the Bobolink Roundtable had identified is the need to incent people who own those lands to take a stewardship approach. So what was their solution? What they came up with was a market where developers purchase a habitat offset to achieve conditions in their permit. And I'm just going to say this up front, that this is not a solution that works in every single scenario, but it is an option. And that's one of the things that certainly from the government's perspective we have heard from our stakeholders is give me options on how I can achieve the conditions in my permit. And Ian talked about the permitting process earlier, so I won't get into that too much. So what is this SARBEX benefits exchange, species at risk benefits exchange piece that we're talking about? Well, we'd like to classify it as a stewardship model benefits exchange system. There are other types of benefits exchange systems. There are we see the carbon capture benefits exchange that you have out west. We also see offsetting, banking, those types of benefits exchange. This is really a stewardship first model. And what it essentially does at the very simplistic level is it brings those, as I talked about, those being the folks who do own the majority of the land of Southern Ontario where Bobolink exists, bringing those folks together with people who need to achieve an overall benefit through their permit and allowing a deal to be made. And at the end of the day, a developer has achieved or is in the process of achieving their conditions within their permit. And on the other side, you have that incentive that we talked about to incent private landowners to undertake stewardship activities on their land. How the system works is, I think it's important to point out that what is M&R's role in all this? And M&R's role is very limited in this exchange system. As I mentioned before, some of the other exchange systems, you see more prominent role of government involved in them. This being a stewardship model, government is not necessarily involved. I think what we do is we provide the policy enablers to allow this to happen. And Ian talked about safe harbor earlier, and I'll get to that in just a second. But we are there to enable this system to work. It really does come down to willing buyers, if I can say it, of an overall benefit, and the willing sellers of who can provide that overall benefit. In the middle, you have a broker. And I think that we are still working through trying to clearly define what a broker is. But at a very simple level, the broker is the person that matches the two parties together. And the reason you have a broker is for a few reasons. One is brokers could be conservation-minded conservation groups, could be other types of organizations who have networks with people on the landscape. They also have the capacity and the ability to provide guidance and provide expertise on how to achieve the conditions in a permit. And at the other level that I think there were some questions about was the monitoring. They also provide that broader scale look at the landscape and can provide that overall monitoring and identifying where these overall benefit activities are taking place. So what are some of the key outcomes I think that we see from the benefits exchange? I think first, it provides financial support to land stewards. So this goes to those folks who have that habitat, want to do the right thing. Here's an incentive for you to do it. It can also provide streamlining for permit approvals. And I think we heard that from the last panel, is it doesn't shorten the time that you get your permit, but at the back end of when you do receive your permit, it is a streamlined. You have an option of where to go to achieve that overall benefit and proceed with your project right away. And it's a simplified option for proponents. Again, it's not the silver bullet, it's not the option for everyone, and it doesn't work everywhere all the time, but it is an option, and certainly that's something that we have heard from our stakeholders. And ultimately, it does create habitat. So going back to the previous slide, thinking of what the challenges and the issues are is, how the heck could this work? Here's a concept that the Bobolink Roundtable, with, again, the agricultural, the development sector, and the conservation-minded folks around the table coming together and pulling this recommendation together. So thinking about some of the strategic parts of the stewardship model benefits exchange, I think first of all, you do have stakeholder participation in the process, and also this idea of transparency. And how could I best describe this is, and I'm going to beat up on M&R here for a minute, but a developer comes into M&R and is told, here's what you need to do, just go do it, let me know when you're done and then you can proceed. Where does the developer go from there? With a benefits exchange, it allows that converse, I guess you could say, or that interaction with people that can, or the connection to people who can provide that overall benefit. It's easy, it's accessible, and it's transparent. You know exactly what it is that you need to do, you know where you need to go, and you can make those connections quickly. It is habitat-based. It's not species-focused. So I'm going to touch on this in a second here, but being habitat-based means that where there are similar habitat needs for other species, it can accommodate for that. And the classic example I'll use is bobolink was listed first, and then meadowlark was listed after. The Bobolink Roundtable has now also agreed to make recommendations on meadowlark as well, recognizing that there are similar habitat requirements between the species. Because it is habitat focused, it can incorporate that. Additionality, so what does this mean? In very simple terms, what this means is that, let's say for example, you have 10 acres of land that you must convert and manage for bobolink. You may find pieces and parts of it across the landscape. Using a broker, you can aggregate that and have your 10 acres. What it also provides, specifically in the bobolink example, as I mentioned earlier, it is a species that relies on managed landscapes. You can have a piece of land that has been set aside for bobolink habitat, but through the natural progression and cycling of agriculture, you can then convert that and move to another parcel of land. So the idea of additionality is to allow that at the end of the day, you have the land or the habitat set aside, but it can be moving across the landscape. And of course, it is an enabling tool. Oh, one point I did want to make is safe harbor that Ian talked about, and I did want to make this point. This is the policy enabler piece that has really helped, I think will help move the benefits exchange along, is if you think, all right, so I am a farmer, or I'm a landowner, or I'm even a conservation authority, and I'm going to enter into a deal with a proponent who's looking to achieve an overall benefit according to their conditions in their permit. And I'm going to manage that land for a period of time. What incentive is there for the person who is providing that habitat when at the back end, at the end of that duration period, they still have that habitat and they may want the flexibility to convert that land for other purposes? Safe harbor is the policy enabler piece that we have worked towards to enable the benefits exchange to go forward. And I think finally, next step, so where are we at with this benefits exchange? I was just given the 5-minute mark there, I think. Where are we at? So we have brought on a third party to implement some pilots. This is really to kind of test some of our hypothesis. This is a new system, a new process within Ontario. They are proceeding to implement some pilots later this spring. From a government perspective, what we are looking at is ways to apply this same concept, taking what we learned from the pilots to apply it more broadly to other species and perhaps in other areas of M&R. And ultimately is to develop a standalone mechanism that would serve as the marketplace for buyers and sellers to come together. Now this last line, innovative ideas start small. At the beginning of the discussion, I talked about a bobolink, a small little bird that does occur across the cow-calf belt in Ontario. And from that, a group of people who have come together and made a recommendation on a concept that can apply very broadly to many different species at risk. And certainly that's where our focus is going forward from the government. Thank you.